Trump reversing his stance on Afghanistan and recommitting to the war there. Last night, the president spoke in very broad strokes, saying he didn't want to give specifics to the enemy. Well, here's what we do know, is that Trump plans to increase troop numbers. He did not give specific numbers, though, but we do hear from congressional sources that it'll be about 4,000 more. And he also spoke of targeting terror networks, going after ISIS, and reducing the influence of the Taliban. Trump also called on Pakistan to step up, calling Pakistan a safe haven for terror. We just heard from Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, who says there will be an announcement coming soon on exact troop numbers. And he also sent a clear signal that the U.S. does, in fact, want peace talks with the Taliban.
The effort is, again, a regional effort. Put pressure on the parties to understand that this fighting is going to take everyone nowhere. And it's time to begin a process. It may very well be a lengthy process, reconciliation and a peace accord. And Afghanistan, as the president said, can choose its form of government that best suits the needs of its people. As long as it rejects terrorism, never provides a territory in Afghanistan to provide safe haven for terrorists, and accommodates all of the groups represented inside of Afghanistan, ethnic groups and others.
And joining me now, Blackwater founder Eric Prince, a former Navy SEAL. Prince now runs a company called Frontier Services Group and was recruited by Steve Bannon to weigh in on the president's Afghanistan war plan. Eric, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So you say pulling out of Afghanistan is a bad idea, but sticking with the same formula is, quote, insanity. What do you make of what you heard from the president last night?
Well, the definition of doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result is insanity. I think Einstein said that. Look, sadly, the president was backed into a bad decision last night. Pentagon never gave him any other realistic options other than more troops and more money. And after 16 years, close to $1 trillion, next year alone, we're spending more than $50 billion, more than the entire UK defense budget just in Afghanistan. And as Secretary Mattis said, we're not winning. I wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal back in June. The president read it. It sparked some conversation and some questions. They're looking for a different path. The sad thing is the the presidency as itself is in a bubble, and there's a lot of generals that are very conventional generals in that bubble, and they really prevented any other serious consideration of anything other than a Pentagon approach of more troops and more money. So go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, I mean, so clearly you were brought in to help weigh in on this. Were any of your ideas accepted by the president mentioned last night? Did any of them make the cut?
Well, look, I know in the presentations I made a big deal about the problems of the ROE, about needing the decision-making to be in Afghanistan, not back in Washington. I mean, sadly, there's been a number of open-air Taliban victory parades just in May, June, and July in Afghanistan of hundreds of Taliban fighters in dozens of captured vehicles in a brazen open-air victory parade, thumbing their nose at the United States and the Afghan government. That's an enemy that's not afraid. Because the targeting cycle and the bureaucracy of the Pentagon, they were unable to strike them. Hopefully, with that clear direction, very clear direction from the president last night, that can at least be prevented.
And part of what you have proposed, if I'm not mistaken, was a military force, proposing to send private contractors to Afghanistan instead of U.S. troops. Why would that be a good idea?
Well, look, already before this troop announcement, there is already almost 9,000 U.S. troops and 26,000 contractors. I'm not advocating any more contractors at all, but rather a real rationalization. Embedding contractors at the battalion level, which is the kind of the smallest unit of maneuver there in Afghanistan, providing them long-term training and support that live with, train with, and patrol with, attaching to the Afghan army, and some air support and some governance support. It takes away the irritant that the Afghans see of a foreign force, an invading force in their country. Contractors that can go back to the same unit long-term, attached to the Afghan army, does not even meet the definition of mercenary. They can be held accountable back through the UCMJ, through the Uniform Code of Military Justice, back through the U.S. justice system. And this all can be done for really 8% of what the spending is there now. So we tried to give the president an option of a cheaper, smaller, long-term and sustainable option. Look, right now, with the Navy having real problems navigating 4 serious collisions in the last year with loss of life, You have the Air Force with 1,500 pilots short, with severe readiness issues of their aircraft, and sadly an Army that can't seem to end insurgency. There is a better place to be spending $50 billion than Afghanistan. So far, that hasn't been accepted, but I think in 6 months, even 3 months, the president's going to see the conventional approach that's already been tried and failed for 16 years. There's got to be some other things considered.
And critics of your plan, Eric, actually cite costs. Generals in the administration cite costs as one reason why it wouldn't be a good idea. Also, there was concern expressed that allies would ditch once U.S. troops pulled out. What do you have to say to those critics?
You know what? Critics on the cost, I challenge them. Come out and debate me. I know what these things cost. I know exactly how to do this. I used to have 26 of our own aircraft in country doing this exactly for the U.S. military. So people that want to shoot holes at costs, let them come and debate. Glad to have that. As for allies, look, the ground mentors, the professionals that would be doing this would come from the United States, or they could come from the NATO countries. So there's still ways for those countries to participate. But really, the NATO contribution, their effectiveness has been very limited because each of those countries send troops with maximum amount of restrictions, and it prevents them from being effective. If they come as individual augmentees supporting the Afghan army, they're there to do a very focused mission, and they come back to that same job, that same valley, with the same battalion for years, and they learn the continuity. The way the U.S. troops deploy there now, they go for 6 or 9 months, and they leave, and all that local area knowledge leaves with them.
Let me just close by talking about Blackwater, your former security firm. As you well know, several employees at Blackwater were convicted in 2007 for the killing of innocent civilians in Baghdad. One of those convictions was overturned just last week. But if your plan was put into place, how would you ensure that something like that would not happen again?
Yeah, let me be clear. The conviction was thrown out, and the sentences were also thrown out for being cruel and unusual under the 8th Amendment. Look, that's why I said any accountability method is covered under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, that any contractor that was there that did an evil act can be held accountable right there on the edge of the battlefield, just like a U.S. military person is now as well.
Eric Prince, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And coming up, a Cleveland Browns player says he just wanted to do his part when he became the first white NFL player to kneel during the national anthem. Will he face the same criticism we've seen of other players? And is this a growing problem for the NFL? Plus, Chelsea Clinton is stepping in to defend fellow first kid Barron Trump after he's criticized over his clothing choice. Well, more NFL players are taking a page from Colin Kaepernick's book. Last night, a dozen Cleveland Brown players kneeled during the national anthem. The team shared a moment of prayer before their home preseason game against the New York Giants. Other teammates huddled nearby to show support. But one player in particular is grabbing headlines today, and he is the lone white player kneeling. Tight end Seth DeValve is believed to be the first white NFL player to take a knee during the anthem, adding to a debate that appeared to be divided along political and racial lines. This gesture comes after Kaepernick drew strong criticism by refusing to stand last season in protest of police brutality and remains without an NFL contract. I'm going to bring in CNN political commentators Ben Ferguson and Keith Boykin, as well as Dave Zirin, sports editor for The Nation magazine. Important to note here, Dave is working on a book along with Seattle Seahawks defensive end Michael Bennett about this very topic. It is due out in April. Dave, I want to start with you. You've spoken with some of these players. What are they telling you?
Well, the reasons that they are giving for why they are kneeling are really twofold. The first is a response to Charlottesville and what they saw, as well as Donald Trump's response saying that good people were marching with Nazis. And the second reason is Colin Kaepernick. It's this idea that these players really do believe that the reason why Colin Kaepernick is not employed right now is really a shot across the bow at them, to keep them in line. And they want to be able to show NFL owners that no, they're not going to be compliant when they feel like the nation's in crisis. So what they're saying is, how do we use our hyper-exalted, brought to you by Cialis platform to say something about the world? And they see anthem protests as the way to get that message out.
Ben, your reaction to this growing protest?
Well, one, let's be clear. How many games did Colin Kaepernick win in his last season in the NFL? How many?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, seriously. Like, I mean, was it one,
I'm happy to have that discussion.
No,
Colin
no,
Kaepernick
I'm just
threw for 16
the reason
touchdowns, had 4 picks.
Right.
Led the NFL in yards per carry, playing for probably the worst team in the National Football League.
But let's be
so
clear.
He had a very
Colin
good season.
Kaepernick's not playing in the NFL right now because Colin Kaepernick lost a whole lot more at the end of his career than he won. I do not believe that it's because of his protest. If Colin Kaepernick would have won more games, he would be on an NFL team right now. Now, the second point about the protest, this is my whole thing. How many of the guys that were kneeling last night were involved in the offseason in any type of protest at the local or state level? How many of the guys kneeling went out there and mentored young African-American men in their community in the offseason? How many of them got involved in politics at all in the offseason? In fact, how many of them are even registered to vote or voted in the last election? I mean, all the guys last night that were there that were kneeling.
Dave, you said you can answer that.
Sure, I can answer that. Players there included people like Kenny Britt, who in 2014 was one of the original NFL protesters around Ferguson, and he wrote "My Children's Lives Matter" on his arm. And these players are very socially conscious. They're involved in foundations. They do stuff on the community
but I'm saying
level
in
that
the
honestly doesn't get reported upon.
Right,
yeah,
but here's my thing. In the offseason, this is my point, though. This is my point.
But
I'm not saying there's some of these guys that aren't doing
Ben,
things.
let him finish. And I
Sure.
also want to get to Keith because we have Keith as part of this panel discussion
please.
too. But Dave, finish what you're going to say, and I want to go to Keith to get his thoughts.
Sure, just chapter and verse. The players who are kneeling are extremely active in their communities and foundations, and they should get credit for that. They don't because it's not the sexiest story in the world, but to create this kind of straw man that, oh, they don't do anything except kneel during the anthem is frankly just, bombastic.
How many of them are registered to vote, out of curiosity?
Ben, you're engaged
Keith,
in typical diversionary tactics. The issue
No,
here
it's a direct question.
The issue here, Ben, is that these are athletes who are standing up, using and exercising their First Amendment right, and the great tradition of Muhammad Ali and Arthur Ashe and many other athletes who've spoken up for social justice causes. Regardless of why Colin Kaepernick is playing or is not playing, the players obviously feel that he has been blackballed. That there are players who are comparable to him who are playing, who haven't led a team to a Super Bowl and been as successful as he, and despite having a bad year or so, hasn't had a chance to continue on. But the reality is that Ben, and I think everybody who's watching this knows that America has a challenging problem with race, and our president isn't making this better. These are athletes standing up in Cleveland, where the United States Justice Department found that the Cleveland Police Department was engaged in a pattern of abusive behavior, where 12-year-old Tamir Rice was shot and killed by police officers the moment after they exited their vehicle in a park. This is a city that has gone through a great deal of racial strife, and it's exactly within their right. I expect them to stand up for something like this, and I applaud them for that. The only thing I'm upset about is that they beat the Giants last night.
Let me say this.
Right,
I have no problem with them. It is absolutely right. I'm not saying it's not their right, but this is my point. I think that if you actually do things in the off season and you actually are registered to vote and you actually get involved,
the assumption is so biased.
Let me finish. Then I think you're legit, and I can respect the idea that you're kneeling during this national anthem. I may not agree with it, but I can respect you. But what I don't like is hypocrisy. What I don't like is when I see players that say, oh, this is the new cool thing to do, and I'm going to walk over there and kneel too, so I'll get some free press out there because somehow I'm over, I mean, it's the idea.
Let me bring in Dave, because Dave,
first of all,
you say some of the blame falls on the owners here as well.
Oh, sure it does. But because one of the things the players are responding to as well is this idea that you've got Donald Trump, as part of his stump speech, speaks out and he brags about Colin Kaepernick not having work. Players know that the owners gave millions of dollars to Donald Trump's campaign, and it bothers them that owners think they're going to be compliant just because of Colin Kaepernick. But I do have to go back to this point. It's kind of the gall of just assuming that these players aren't socially active in the offseason. When, Ben, you just don't know. And I know these players, and they are active. So you're painting a picture that isn't true. And honestly, it feels very prejudicial.
I went on social media. Before this segment started, I went on social media of almost every player that I could see that was in the picture last night. And I looked back as far as I could go over the offseason, and I didn't see many. I didn't see many political posts. I certainly didn't see anything talking out there in the community as you're describing it for most.
You don't know any of these players. You don't know these people.
Hold on. Let Keith speak.
This is a timeout. This is a red herring, Ben. You do not get to decide how and when people decide to protest. That is not your job.
Check their Twitter.
They are exercising a protest regardless of whether they do it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. They're doing it now.
Do me a favor.
And you do me a favor, Ben. Just respect the fact that they're protesting. Don't try to set limits on when they must meet your standard.
Let's do a story on how many of these guys voted in the last election.
Ben, if you can name
offline. Dave, got to cut you off.
Oh.
Sorry. But you guys can,
so okay.
The good news is you can talk offline and you can this conversation. Sound good? Thank you so much to the three of you.
Thank you.
We have another story we want to cover. Chelsea Clinton is coming to the defense of President Trump's youngest child. This after a conservative website questioned Barron Trump's clothing. Clinton sent out this tweet, quote, "It's high time the media and everyone leave Barron Trump alone and let him have the private childhood he deserves." The Daily Caller, a conservative news and opinion site, criticized 11-year-old Barron Trump and posted an article saying it's high time Trump's youngest son starts dressing like he's in the White House. He was talking about this picture right here. And with me now to discuss this is CNN contributor Kate Anderson Brower. She is the author of First Women. Kate, thanks for coming on. What did you make of Chelsea Clinton's response?
Well, I thought it was, very poignant because when she came into the White House, her father was elected. She was only 12 years old herself. She had been made fun of. Michael Myers on SNL spoofed her and had to actually write an apology letter to the White House afterwards. So clearly this is something she feels very genuinely about protecting 11-year-old Barron Trump. And I think most people respect that and the privacy of children, but their lives are difficult. When he goes to a soccer game, the motorcade arrives early so that he doesn't draw attention to himself. I mean, there are little things like that that make everyday life challenging.
Right. And what happened to the kids are off limits?
I think that, this is a sign that is the case. I mean, this reporter has gotten into a lot of hot water over this story. So
but
I think
seems like it's happened repeatedly. I mean, this is not the first time that Barron Trump has been the target of someone in the media. So
I do think that now that everything is, the internet has really taken over, it's a different world now. People can tweet things that are harmful, and I think people have to remember that this is just an 11-year-old boy who actually, I think one issue is that he looks a lot older than he is. I mean, he's very, very young, and it's unfair to him, absolutely.
All right, Kate Anderson Brower, thank you very much. We do appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm Pamela Brown, filling in for my colleague, Brooke Baldwin. Great to have you join us on this Tuesday. The Lead with Jake Tapper starts right now.
Thanks, Pamela. President Trump reportedly feeling aggrieved, about to hold a campaign-style rally near the southern border. No teleprompter, adoring crowds. What could go wrong? The Lead starts right now. Just hours after President Trump called for unity in America, he's on his way to Arizona, where protesters and 2 disapproving Republican senators are waiting. Could everything President Trump said last night be wiped away with one ad lib? Clone Wars. An email prankster strikes again, this time posing as a sort of bizarro Steve Bannon, fooling top editors of the alt-right news organization that Bannon now runs again. Why would its editor-in-chief share a smear of Ivanka Trump? DNA evidence on the knife indicated that he might not be the killer, and now with just hours left to live, a condemned inmate gets a surprise lifeline from the governor. But why did this take nearly 2 decades? Good afternoon and welcome to The Lead. I'm Jake Tapper. Tonight, President Trump will take the stage in Phoenix, Arizona for an unscripted campaign rally, we're told. Comes fresh off a speech last night in which the president laid out his priorities, a few actual policy details, for a path forward in Afghanistan. The question, of course, for tonight, will the president echo what he said in his scripted, teleprompted address last night, calling out bigotry and prejudice, urging Americans to come together with love and in peace, or, as is his wont, when speaking before adoring crowds and freed from the constraints of his teleprompter, might President Trump come closer to expressing something slightly more divisive? That's the question. CNN White House correspondent Sarah Murray is live in Phoenix for us. And Sarah, even elected officials there are not exactly rolling out the welcome mat. The Democratic mayor of Phoenix asked the president to delay the rally, and the Republican senators there are both at odds with President Trump.
That's right, Jake. You can expect President Trump's words to be closely scrutinized here today as he takes the stage in a state where both Republican senators, Jeff Flake and John McCain, have been harsh critics of the president. In fact, Jeff Flake's challenger is even expected to attend the rally, and everyone will be watching to see what is the president's tone tonight. Is it another talk about unity, or is it something harsher? From Commander-in-Chief to Campaigner-in-Chief. A day after President Trump addressed the nation on his Afghanistan strategy,
I am here tonight to lay out our path forward in Afghanistan.
he's hitting the road in Arizona amid deep divisions. Even the mayor of Phoenix implored Trump to hold off on tonight's event. As anger simmers over the president's reaction to violence from white supremacists in Charlottesville.
Steadfast.
On Monday, Trump sought to diffuse those tensions before his remarks on Afghanistan.
When we open our hearts to patriotism, there is no room for prejudice, no place for bigotry, and no tolerance for hate.
Then Trump outlined his approach to the nearly 16-year war there, a conflict he once argued America should withdraw from.
My original instinct was to pull out, and historically, I like following my instinct. But all my life, I've heard that decisions are much different when you sit behind the desk in the Oval Office.
The president offering his signature tough talk.
We are not nation building again. We are killing terrorists.
But few specifics on how many troops he would commit or how he would define success, even as he promised victory.
We will defeat them, and we will defeat them handily.
And while he slammed his predecessor, Trump's plan to use military might to wipe out terrorists and diplomatic pressure to cajole Pakistan in many ways echoed the Obama administration's strategy. Now Trump is asking Americans to place their trust in him at a time when many have deep misgivings. A Washington Post ABC News poll shows 56% of Americans disapprove of Trump's response to Charlottesville. Just 28% approve. House Speaker Paul Ryan, in a CNN town hall, said Trump fumbled his response by equivocating white supremacists with counter-protesters.
I do believe that he messed up in his comments on Tuesday when it sounded like a moral equivocation, or at the very least moral ambiguity, when we need extreme moral clarity.
But Vice President Mike Pence is leaping to Trump's defense.
I know this president. I know his heart. And I heard him. I heard him on the day that the Charlottesville tragedy happened, when he denounced hate and violence.
Now, before the president arrives here in Phoenix, he'll be visiting Yuma, where he'll be doing a tour of border enforcement materials there. Now, once he gets here, one of the things we'll be watching for tonight is what exactly the president has to say about controversial Sheriff Joe Arpaio. He told Fox News he was considering pardoning the sheriff. He's been held in contempt of court for violating a judge's order in a racial profiling case. So far, no word if Trump will mention that tonight. Jake.
All right, Sarah Murray in Arizona for us today. Thank you so much. With Steve Bannon, the president's now fired chief strategist, back in charge, the far-right news website Breitbart is blasting President Trump's Afghanistan strategy. That's a strategy opposite what Bannon had advised and opposite the president's America First anti-interventionist rhetoric. President Trump reportedly had been concerned about the damage Bannon might be able to do from outside the White House, and now new emails obtained by CNN provide insight into just how nasty it might get and how low the editor-in-chief of Breitbart might be willing to go, including sharing a personal smear against first daughter Ivanka Trump. War was how one of Breitbart's senior editors responded to Chief Strategist Steve Bannon's ouster from the White House last week. Now a self-described email prankster posing as Bannon has fooled top staff at the right-wing website into spilling how that war might play out. The real Steve Bannon returned to Breitbart as executive chairman Friday, just as the fake Bannon was sending emails to editor-in-chief Alex Marlow. The topic? Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump. So do you think you'll have them packed and shipping out before Christmas? The prankster asked. The very real Marlow replied, "Let me see what I can do. Hard to know given your description of them as evil. I don't know what motivates them. If they are semi-normal, then yes, they out by end of year. The prankster, who tweets under the name Sinan Reborn, shared numerous emails with CNN. In the exchanges, Marlowe pledged that he and several other top editors would do Bannon's dirty work against certain Trump White House aides. I spooked them today, Marlowe said in one response to the man he thought was Steve Bannon. Did 5 stories on globalist takeover, positioning you as only hope to stop it. You need to own that. Just have surrogates do the dirty work. Boyle, Raheem, me, Tony have been waiting for this, Marlowe added, referring to Breitbart Washington editor Matthew Boyle, Breitbart London editor-in-chief Raheem Kassam, and Breitbart reporter Tony Lee. Breitbart's editor-in-chief also shared with the fake Bannon an unfounded and unsubstantiated personal smear of first daughter Ivanka Trump, perhaps showing the lengths to which he is willing to go to push Ivanka and Jared out of the White House. It is a smear CNN will not repeat. A senior official at the White House today asked about the emails, declined to comment. But Marlowe was not the only Breitbart editor targeted and fooled by the Bannon bluff. Senior editor-at-large Joel Pollack, the man behind that war tweet, was emailed too. Wrote the bogus Bannon, reading online about how I'll be bringing forth my wrath on Ivanka and Jared. I'd be doing this great nation a service if I did. Responded the very real Joel Pollack. Indeed. No one can figure out what they do. Responded the bogus Bannon. Had a good chat with Alex Marlowe. Seems he's already aligning the crosshairs and making me the masked puppeteer. Responded the very real Joel Pollack. Excellent. The prankster tells CNN his latest stunt was inspired by Bannon's firing, saying that Breitbart was, quote, literally falling over itself to attack those Bannon sat drinking coffee with days before. This is not his first email hoax. In July, the self-described lazy anarchist fooled top White House officials into thinking he was Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, and Reince Priebus, among others, causing quite a stir in the West Wing. The candid, previously private exchanges with Breitbart's top editors sheds light on the inner workings of the site that Bannon once referred to as the platform for the alt-right, now that a post-White House Bannon is back on staff. Bannon told the Weekly Standard Friday he was, quote, back on his weapons at the Breitbart machine. Quote, I'm about to go back knowing what I know, and we're about to rev that machine up, he promised. We did not get a response for comment from Steve Bannon, but we did get one from Breitbart. The statement reads, quote, the obsession with Breitbart News is simply a result of our effectiveness. This time, an imposter deceitfully obtained and shared with CNN tongue-in-cheek emails that revealed that we feel globalists present an existential threat to the agenda that got President Trump elected. If people want to know our thinking, they don't need to judge us on illicitly obtained comments that were intended to be private. They can simply read our front page, unquote. Coming up next, did a 45-year-old photograph of women in miniskirts help convince President Trump to keep the U.S. military in Afghanistan? That's next. Stay with us.
The Lead with Jake Tapper is...
Welcome back. Continuing with our politics lead, an email prankster posing as Steve Bannon, sharing with CNN candid exchanges that he had with Breitbart editors that were about Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump, and not particularly nice. My political panel is here to discuss this and more. Juana, let me start with you. I mean, these emails from Marlowe, the editor-in-chief from Breitbart, when he's talking about how he's going to be able to try to get Jared and Ivanka to leave the White House before Christmas. I spooked them today. I did 5 stories on globalist takeovers. You'll have surrogates doing your dirty work for you, and then sharing this rumor that we're not going to repeat about Ivanka Trump's personal life. I have to say, I've been around this town for a long time. I was pretty shocked.
Absolutely. And I think as journalists, too, we can't imagine ever engaging in those kinds of conversations about sources that we purportedly cover and do journalism about. I think, though, this kind of harkens back to what we always wondered would happen with Breitbart if Trump kind of strayed away from some of the populist ideals that he had during the campaign, many of those perhaps shared by Steve Bannon, who's now back at Breitbart. This is kind of Breitbart as I think a lot of people feared it would act, and Bannon is now there, so he has to own some of this for a president that, you know, he worked for up until very, very recently. So it'll be really interesting to see what that relationship looks like and what comes out of this, given just kind of the scope of this reporting that you've just released.
Now, just to be clear, Steve Bannon did not write any of these emails. It was somebody pretending to be Steve Bannon. Bannon has talked about weaponizing or using his weapon, Breitbart. Maybe I'm being naive. I find it hard to believe that Steve Bannon actually would want disgusting rumors about Ivanka Trump to be part of that.
I have no idea. I think it's charming that you're shocked. There's very little that would shock me from the alt-right. And Breitbart, Mr. Bannon describes it as a platform for the alt-right. I do have to say, just for political hygiene, that I hated it when Hillary's emails were hacked and published, or John Podesta's rather. By the way, some of them were mine. I had emailed with John Podesta years ago. I hate that. This is not a theft, though. This is slightly different. It's not a cyber crime. It's not a hack and a threat and a theft. It is
a hoodwinking.
It's a hoodwinking. But I do, in a sense, I don't mean to apologize for Breitbart, and I don't even know those guys. I don't think I'd like them if I did. But I do feel for somebody who thought they were having a private conversation with a friend. And it could really be that there's just a lot of bravado in that shop. And it's still pretty shocking what they're saying. But if I can offer a mild defense, it is that it's not what they were saying in public. Let's look at what they say, as they said to you. Let's look what they say on the front page of the website, which is shocking enough for me.
But they have been going after Ivanka and Jared. That's clear. I mean, although it's been about policy and things related to that, not about ugly smear rumors.
Yeah, it confirms a lot of the suspicions that many people, even people who I think, see Breitbart as something that they can utilize to get the conservative message out. It does confirm a lot of those suspicions. I think the question now is, how does this alter the profile of Breitbart going forward? Before this incident, before we knew that some of this was uncovered, it was seen as this platform for a lot of the anti-globalists or a lot of grassroots conservatives. The Trump campaign used it very deftly. Now, does it render being changed, its profile being changed, or its effectiveness being altered, because it's seen as a site or platform for personal vendettas? And the other thing is that, what is the president's reaction to this, given that they've gone after the one thing he cares more about than anything, which is family? And when you're going after Ivanka Trump in a very personal way, or there's news about that, how does he react? And that's going to be something to watch for going forward.
I mean, the president has very clearly promoted Breitbart. Do you think learning that the editor-in-chief of Breitbart is smearing his beloved daughter, and I said it in all sincerity, his beloved daughter Ivanka, do you think that will have an effect?
I think it absolutely could. This is a president who, when he sees people as enemies, when he sees challenges, particularly to his family, which, as everyone has noted, he's very close to, he tends to lash out. I wouldn't be surprised to see a tweet from this president about this, while, of course, the publication has been sympathetic and promoting to some of the ideas he espoused on the campaign trail. I think for this White House, family matters more, and I think that we could see the president slowly start to turn, and what effect that has to the base of supporters that still see Breitbart as somewhere sympathetic to and promoting of their ideals, I think is going to be a really interesting thing to watch in the days and weeks ahead.
Yeah, I'm more skeptical that he'll turn on Breitbart. You may be right. We don't know, but we're going to watch this in real time. Our president clearly adores his daughter, and she's a very impressive woman, but he adores his base, too. And those are the people he brags. He could shoot a guy on Fifth Avenue, they'd still be with him. So does he really want to go after the house organ of a good part of his base, even if they're privately daughter? That's a tough position for him to be in.
So Breitbart has been criticizing President Trump for his decision about Afghanistan. President Trump, in his remarks, kind of acknowledging that it was something of a flip-flop. Take a listen.
My original instinct was to pull out. And historically, I like following my instinct. But all my life, I've heard that decisions are much different when you sit behind the desk in the Oval Office.
It's a rare moment of changing his mind and of candor.
Very rare. And I think he wanted to provide just a bit of an evidentiary trail of how he arrived at the decision. But it is ultimately still a decision that falls in line with where he's been on national security and foreign policy in the past, which is resolute and strong. So he believes that this action is resolute and strong. He wants to explain it through that lens versus the lens of having changed.
Although, I mean, it is clearly not what he has said in the past. In 2013, he was saying, get out of Afghanistan, that's a loser of a war.
We've seen an evolution of this president since he was a private citizen all the way until the speech that he gave, seeing him evolve on this. And as he said in that speech, I've heard that these decisions are different when you're in the Oval Office. It seems that he's coming around to the reality that past presidents and people who work in this space have realized that there's no easy, quick win in Afghanistan. And I think that speech and the remorse that you kind of heard from the president really seems to recognize that seriousness.
And as has been said many times, there's no easy decision that comes to the president, because if it was easy, it would have been made long before it got to the president's desk. Everyone stick around. We have new evidence that could show his DNA wasn't on the murder weapon. And today, just hours before his scheduled execution, this convicted killer got another chance. Was an innocent man about to die? Stay with us.
He is the Twitter president. He rose to power 140 characters at a time. But could his tweets backfire on his presidency?
I think if Donald Trump implodes, it'll be because of Twitter.